And I want to say here, what I mean by pattern is not the pretty design painted on anything, but it is rather the pattern of production, the way production is organized, how you can put things together in groups, how that changes over time. And again, to repeat something that's already just been said by Jonathan, the interesting thing about tiles is, though we're often very happy to show tiles as individual items in our museums and in books and to sort of look at them one at a time, the difference between tiles and vessels is that tiles were never thought of ever as single items. They're always part of a tiling scheme, part of a large group, made in large numbers, and designed, so both conceived, made, designed, and then experienced by everyone as part of an ensemble. And I think this is really, oh, and here's another ensemble. I can't quite do the fancy graphics. I'm going to be taking courses in Photoshop with Jonathan later in the year, I hope. Another example. Most of us would be very happy to have one of those tiles in our collections, but rather than to have the privilege of having great walls of them. It's different when we come and look at pots. Because although pots we know were made in large numbers, kiln load of pots could have been many dozen, possibly even some hundreds of individual vessels fired at one time, they're not necessarily conceived of as sets. The idea of matching sets of pots is actually quite a late development, certainly a very late development in Europe, coming in the 17th and then particularly in the 18th century. And they're certainly not sold as or experienced by the purchasers as sets of things. They are individual items that are sold in the marketplace and used. So although quite a number of pots look the same, they're not part of anything like a same group as any tile would once have formed part. Now, patterns, and this is where I begin to talk about what I mean by patterns. There are a number of dated and signed vessels in the Kashan industry, and there is a consistent pattern that we can see. So these are the earliest dated pieces that I know of, starting in 574, 1179 in the top left, and they're all painted in what I see as a single style. The main designs painted in luster on a white background with inscription. So here dated from 574, 575, 587, and then there are a few more, another one of 587, 590, and two of 590 here, which are the latest dated in this style. The next dated pots are in a different decorative style, where the background is luster and the main design is in reserve in white or scratched away. The luster is scratched away. And from 594, another 594, 595, from this date onwards until the second or third decade of the 13th century, every dated piece is in this style. Now that's what I call a pattern. And this is what the pattern looks like. These are the number of dated pieces against the years down to 624 in this case. It's not terribly helpful like that, and now I've got a bit of fancy graphics. If you put them this way, you see a very few scatter along here and then a bulge. And all of those first pieces, there are only 7, but they're all in what I call the miniature style. All of the rest, right up to here, are in the Kashan style. We have 96 recorded. I have 96 recorded dated pieces. Now, this proposal could be blown, and this is like a scientific law, it could be blown apart entirely by suddenly finding a miniature style piece right in the middle of the dated thing here, or, alternatively the other way. But so far, this pattern has been consistent. And there's another interesting thing about this pattern, which is that it grows here. There seems to be statistically significant sort of lump here of dated pieces. I think this is getting up to how many? 17 dated pieces in 614 that I've recorded. And of course, we don't know quite what that means, whether it's an artifact of survival that just happens to be a whole bunch of late pieces have survived. The Georgian finds, which tend to be the late pieces, may have distorted all that. So it may be that it's not that the industry kind of builds up like this. Well, we don't know. But there is a pattern there, and then that gives us some basis for, as it were, testing, establishing any theories we have into the future. The other thing which is quite marked here is this, where suddenly from these quite high numbers of dated pieces up till here, we have the historical records of telling this is when the Mongols came through. And although Kashan is, in the words of the Encyclopedia of Islam, relatively spared, obviously a lot of their patrons weren't. And suddenly you have a lot of gaps in the years. From here to here, there are dated pieces for every year. Suddenly we have gaps. We only have a couple, 1 or 2 dated pieces that carry on. And I think it's fair, it's a fair proposal to make on that basis that what we are seeing here is possibly even a growth in production and export, maybe a growth just in the use of writing and dating pieces as well, but something quite dramatic happens at this point. Now, I do apologize, I'm not talking about tiles, but I have to say I'm talking about potters who made tiles, so at least I'm not too far off.